My girlfriend said, "You're too available, Ryan. It's not attractive." She didn't look up from her MacBook, fingers dancing across the keyboard like she was composing a symphony instead of designing another pretentious logo for Miami's latest overpriced juice bar. I stood there holding takeout sushi from her favorite place, the expensive one that charged $30 for 6 pieces of raw fish. "You're right," I said, setting the bag on her cluttered kitchen counter. "Starting tomorrow, I'm a ghost." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Sophie finally looked up, her green eyes narrowing. "Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being strategic. See, I'm a software engineer. I solve problems for a living. And Sophie? She just presented me with a very interesting problem to solve. The next morning, I walked into my downtown Miami office with a new perspective. My assistant Nina looked up from her desk, perfectly manicured eyebrows raised. "You look different. Good different." "I need you to handle something for me," I said, dropping into the chair across from her. "From now on, you're my social media manager, my calendar keeper, and my Sophie filter." Nina's lips curved into a smile. She was 25, sharp as a blade, and had been waiting for something more interesting than scheduling meetings. "What kind of filtering are we talking about?" "The complete kind. Every call, every text, every surprise visit. I'm unavailable." Within hours, Sophie was testing the new system. Nina fielded 3 calls, 2 texts, and 1 angry voicemail. Each time, she delivered the same message. "Ryan's in meetings all day. I'll let him know you called." By day 3, Sophie was spiraling. She showed up at my office unannounced, her usual boho chic replaced by something more desperate. Too much makeup, too tight jeans, the kind of outfit that screamed, "Please notice me." "Your assistant says you're busy," she said, standing in my doorway like an accusation. I glanced up from my monitor, let my eyes linger on her for exactly 2 seconds, then returned to my screen. "I am busy." "Since when?" "Since you told me being available wasn't attractive." She stepped into my office, closing the door behind her. "I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said." I finally looked at her properly. "You wanted space. You got it." That weekend, while Sophie blew up my phone with increasingly frantic messages, I took a trip to South Beach with Elena, a stunning client from our Barcelona office who was in town for meetings. I posted exactly 3 photos on Instagram, one of us at dinner, one at a rooftop bar, and one of Elena laughing at something I'd said, her hand resting on my arm. Sophie's response was immediate and nuclear. She called Nina 6 times in 1 hour. "She's losing her mind," Nina reported Monday morning, clearly enjoying herself. "She wants to know who Elena is, where you went, and why you're not answering her calls." "What did you tell her?" "That you're exploring new opportunities." I laughed. Nina was better at this than I'd expected. But while I was playing ghost, my old college friend Miguel was playing detective. He ran a small private investigation firm in Miami, and I'd asked him to do a little digging into Sophie's sudden need for space. The thumb drive he handed me the following Tuesday contained enough evidence to end a marriage, destroy a reputation, and fuel a revenge plot worthy of a Stephen King novel. Photos of Sophie with Adrian Castellanos, a married startup investor with more money than morals. Text messages dating back 3 months, covering every girls' night out and work emergency Sophie had claimed. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even a jewelry purchase that explained the new bracelet Sophie claimed she'd bought for herself. "Your girlfriend's been busy," Miguel said, lighting a cigarette outside my office building. "This Adrian guy's loaded, married to some socialite and apparently has a thing for struggling artists." I stared at the photos on my phone. Sophie looked happy in them, happier than she'd looked with me in months. "How long?" "Based on what I found? At least 4 months." Maybe longer. 4 months. That covered our last vacation, her birthday, the night she'd told me she loved me while we watched the sunrise from my balcony. There's more, Miguel said. The wife doesn't know, but she's not stupid. Camila Castellanos runs in the art scene circles. If someone were to say, accidentally let slip about Adrian's extracurricular activities, I pocketed my phone. Send me everything. That night, I crafted my response. Not to Sophie, she could wait. To the situation. I started with social media. Subtle posts about new chapters and exciting opportunities. Photos with Elena became photos with other beautiful women. Colleagues, clients, friends of friends. I wasn't cheating, but I was certainly available to everyone except Sophie. Then I got creative with my calendar. Suddenly I was traveling constantly. New York for a tech conference, Los Angeles for client meetings, Chicago for a startup pitch. Each trip was real, each post was strategic, and each absence made Sophie more desperate. Her friends started reaching out. Casual messages asking how I was doing, if I was seeing anyone, whether Sophie and I were okay. I gave them just enough information to fuel the gossip mill. Things were complicated. I was focusing on my career. I was meeting interesting people. Within 2 weeks, Sophie's entire social circle was buzzing with rumors about my mysterious transformation. The girl who'd complained I was too available was now the girl whose boyfriend had become Miami's most eligible ghost. But I wasn't done, not even close. The art gallery opening was Sophie's big moment. She'd been working on the promotional materials for months, calling it her breakthrough project. The gallery owner was well connected, the artists were trendy, and the opening night would be packed with Miami's cultural elite, including Adrian's wife, Camila. I arrived fashionably late with Elena, who'd flown in specifically for this. She looked stunning in a black dress that cost more than Sophie's rent, her arm linked through mine as we walked through the gallery's glass doors. Sophie spotted me immediately. Her face went through a fascinating series of expressions: surprise, anger, hurt, and something that might have been panic. She was standing near a sculpture that looked like a metal pretzel, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, probably a gift from Adrian. "Ryan?" Her voice carried across the room, turning heads. I smiled and waved, then turned my attention to the nearest painting as if she were just another acquaintance. Adrian appeared at Sophie's side within seconds. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. His hand found the small of Sophie's back in a gesture that was supposed to look casual but screamed ownership. "Is that him?" Elena whispered. "That's him. He looks nervous." She was right. Adrian kept glancing around the room, checking his phone, adjusting his tie. He knew Camila would be here. She was on the gallery's board of directors. I waited until the crowd was at its thickest, then made my move. A casual conversation with the gallery owner about the featured artists. A mention of how excited I was to see Camila's latest philanthropic project. A suggestion that she might enjoy the intimate viewing room in the back, where the gallery kept its most exclusive pieces. 20 minutes later, Camila Castellanos walked into the back room to find her husband with his tongue down Sophie's throat. The scream that followed could have shattered the pretzel sculpture. What happened next was better than any reality TV show. Camila didn't just confront Adrian, she destroyed him. In front of 50 of Miami's most influential people, she detailed his affairs, his lies, and his creative accounting with their joint assets. She threw her champagne in his face, called Sophie a pathetic homewrecker, and announced that her divorce lawyer would be in touch. Sophie tried to run. Adrian tried to explain. The gallery owner tried to restore order. I tried not to laugh, but Adrian wasn't finished humiliating himself. In the parking lot, drunk on champagne and rage, he cornered me between 2 cars. "You think you're clever?" he slurred, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You think you've won something?" "I think you should call an Uber," I said calmly. "Sophie told me about you. Said you were pathetic, clingy, said she needed a real man. That stung more than I'd expected, but it also clarified things. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the alcohol on his breath. Adrian, right? Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away, get in your overpriced car, and drive home to whatever's left of your marriage. If I see you near Sophie again, if I hear you've contacted her, if you so much as like one of her Instagram posts, I'll make sure everyone in Miami knows exactly what kind of real man you are. To emphasize my point, I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the side of his BMW, leaving a long, deep scratch in the pristine paint. Consider it abstract art, I said. Adrian's face went purple, but he didn't swing. Cowards rarely do when they're not sure they'll win. I walked away, already pulling out my phone to text Nina. The video of Camilla's meltdown would be on Instagram within the hour, courtesy of a local influencer who owed me a favor. But I still wasn't done. Over the next week, I systematically dismantled the life Sophie and I had built together. I emptied our joint accounts, money I'd contributed, legally mine. I canceled the health insurance plan that covered her, a benefit from my job that I was under no obligation to maintain. I changed the passwords on the Netflix, Spotify, and Amazon accounts she'd been using. None of it was illegal. All of it was devastating. Sophie's calls became increasingly desperate. She showed up at my office, my apartment, my favorite coffee shop. Each time, I was polite but distant, available to everyone except her. Nina, meanwhile, had become a master of psychological warfare. She started rumors about Adrian's business dealings, suggested his startup investments were toxic, and made sure everyone knew Sophie had been sleeping with a married man for months. "You're enjoying this too much," I told her after she'd spent an hour crafting fake reviews for Adrian's investment firm. "He had it coming," she said without looking up from her laptop. They both did. There was something in her tone that made me pause. "Nina?" She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd missed before. Anger. Personal anger. "Sophie called me last month," she said. "When you were in New York. She was drunk, angry that you weren't answering her calls. She told me I was just a secretary, that I'd never amount to anything, that I should know my place." I stared at her. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't need to. I knew she'd hang herself eventually." Nina's smile was sharp as glass. "I just helped tie the rope." The Miami Tech Gala was the city's biggest networking event of the year. 500 of the most successful people in South Florida gathered in a waterfront ballroom to celebrate innovation and make deals. I was scheduled to present an award for emerging entrepreneurs. Sophie and Adrian were both there. Separately now, Adrian's wife had moved fast with the divorce papers, and Sophie had apparently been blacklisted from his social circle. I took the stage at 9 p.m., looking out at the crowd of familiar faces. In the front row, Sophie sat alone, wearing a dress I recognized from our better days. In the back, Adrian nursed a whiskey and tried to look invisible. "Good evening," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate innovation, creativity, and the entrepreneurial spirit that makes Miami such a dynamic city." Polite applause. But before we talk about the future, I want to share a story about availability, about what it means to be present, to be reliable, to be there when someone needs you. I found Sophie's eyes in the crowd. She was staring at me with a mixture of hope and fear. I used to think availability was about always saying yes, always being ready to drop everything for the people you care about, always being accessible. More murmurs from the crowd. This wasn't the usual corporate speech. But I learned something recently. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can offer someone is your absence. Sometimes being unavailable is the greatest gift you can give. Sophie's face had gone pale. Because when you're truly unavailable, when you're focused on your own growth, your own success, your own happiness, you discover who really values you, and more importantly, you discover who doesn't. I paused, letting the words sink in. So here's to all the entrepreneurs in the room who've learned that lesson, who've discovered that the best business decision is sometimes knowing when to walk away from a bad deal. The applause was uncertain, confused. Now, let's talk about this year's award winner. But before I could continue, Adrian was pushing through the crowd toward the stage, his face red with alcohol and rage. "You think you're so smart?" he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you've won?" Security moved toward him, but he was already climbing onto the stage. "This is about Sophie, isn't it?" he slurred into the microphone. "You couldn't handle that she chose a real man over some pathetic—" I didn't let him finish. I stepped aside as he lunged for me, and his momentum carried him straight into the champagne tower behind the podium. Glasses shattered, champagne exploded, and Adrian went down hard. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Security swarmed the stage. But I wasn't done. Sophie was on her feet now, pushing through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. "You bastard!" she screamed as she reached the stage. "You ruined everything!" She swung at me, her hand aimed at my face. I caught her wrist easily, my fingers closing around her delicate bones. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying through the chaos. "I'm not available, especially not for you." Security pulled her away, still screaming. Adrian was helped to his feet, champagne dripping from his expensive suit. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, phones recording everything. I straightened my tie, stepped back to the microphone, and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the best innovation is knowing when to upgrade." The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. I walked off the stage, through the crowd of admirers and well-wishers, out onto the hotel's waterfront terrace. The Miami skyline glittered across the bay, and I could hear the party continuing inside. I pulled out my phone, the same phone Sophie had called 100 times in the past month, and hurled it as far as I could into the dark water. Sometimes the best revenge is being unavailable, especially when everyone wants a piece.